Bloodborne has always been my favorite Souls-like game of all time, and I can safely say it's the most beloved amongst the community. I mean, you get memes for Bloodborne 2, or when will Sony ever release Bloodborne into the PC? I mean, it's practically everywhere. I absolutely love the dark gothic atmosphere it has and how it perfectly reflected the Victorian-esque time period with its building structures, character designs, and even medicine, in a way. At first I thought the game was going to have this simple story about just hunting werewolves and monsters alike and figuring out how to break the curse affecting the town. But the further I played into this game, I began to realize that the story was much, much deeper and more complex than that, with its Lovecraftian mystery starting to come into light, and that made me love the game even more. The NPCs you meet along the way all have their own stories that you can learn more if you decide to do their quests. In the base game, you have Eileen, the Crow Hunter, that later tied in with the Bloody Crow of Canehurst and gave a bit of insight about what would happen if the hunters give in to the hunt. And Alfred, the Hunter of Vilebloods, which led you to the Canehurst Castle and the Undead Queen Annalise. In the DLCs, you meet Simon, the Herald, during the Hunter's nightmare. I won't go into too much detail about who this man is, but based on his dialogues, he clearly knew a pretty dark secret that the church was hiding, and what caused the nightmare to happen in the first place. In order to uncover the secret, we had to venture towards a certain clock tower and kill the one who inhabited it. That person was none other than Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower, and the main topic of today's video. Lady Maria was never mentioned in the Bloodborne base game until you start the Old Hunters DLC. There were two NPCs from that DLC that spoke her name. Simon, who I mentioned earlier, wanted you to kill her to uncover the secret, and Saint Adeline from the research hall, which I will talk more about later in the video. When you finally meet Lady Maria up in the Astral Clock Tower, you find her sitting in a chair with her head lowered down and her hand hanging to the side. Looking closely, you can clearly see blood stains on her garment near her neck area and a pool of blood underneath her, which I don't really want to say anything without getting in trouble on YouTube, but I think you guys might know what I'm talking about given the context clues. Anyways, you see yourself stepping closer and reaching out to touch her when she suddenly grabs you and hastily pulls you close to whisper into your ears. A corpse should be left well alone. In a gentle release, she let you go and stood up from her chair, almost similarly to the way Gaomon did so towards the endgame. The moment she pulled her trusty weapon, the Rakuyo, and pulled it apart into twin blades, the boss battle began. Now, when you first heard her speak to you, her voice sounded familiar. And when you zoom into her face, you can't help but feel like you've met her before. In fact, you did. Well, kinda. If you haven't put two to two together, Lady Maria looked exactly like the plain doll from the Hunter's Dream, the one you talk to who levels up your stats. It's almost uncanny how exactly the same they look, except the doll didn't capture Lady Maria's personality. She has more of a gentle and polite presence, but at the same time, she didn't really have much of a personality after that. But who created this doll? Well, it was Gaomon, the one in charge of the Hunter's Dream. He obviously knew about Lady Maria and perhaps was pretty close to her to some regard. Otherwise, the doll wouldn't have been made to look exactly like her. Now the questions were, what were Gaomon's and Lady Maria's stories with one another? Why was she in the nightmare in the first place? What was she trying to hide? Well, before I answer these questions, let's start at the very beginning, to the first hunters. After you defeat Lady Maria, her attire becomes available to purchase through the Bath Messengers in the Hunter's Dream, which gave us a clue about her heritage. It read, Among the first hunters, all students of Gaomon, was the Lady Maria. This was her hunter's garb, crafted in Canehurst. Maria is distantly related to the undead queen, but had great admiration for Gaomon, unaware of his curious mania. Due to her being related to the Queen Annalise, that would make her a vile blood. I'd like to make a separate video about the history of Queen Annalise and her vile bloods, so I won't be going into too much details in this video. To give it a simple description of them, vile bloods were hunters of blood, meaning they imbue their own blood into their weapons and use it to hunt down other hunters for their blood to give to their undead queen. Basically, if you play any Souls-like games, you would have these random invasions from other players who will then try to kill you for souls or whatever rewards you get from it. When I played Dark Souls 3 for the first time, this was before I knew that these embers that you get in the game were the cause of it, I'd always get invaded in those random times, and that shit pissed me off so much because it interrupted my immersion of the game. I found out later on that these embers not only increases like your health pool and like basically your buffs, but it opens up your world for PvP. Luckily, Bloodborne has this option to play offline or online, so you wouldn't have to deal with these annoying ass invaders. Anyways, let's get back to Lady Maria. During her time in Canehurst, Lady Maria was soon recognized by the Queen for her fighting capabilities, and she was given the hunting garment that we're all familiar with. Despite being a vile blood, Lady Maria disliked the idea of using blood blades. In the description of her rakuyo, hunter weapon wielded by Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower. A trick sword originated in the same country as the Canehurst Chikage, only this sword feeds not off blood, but instead demands great dexterity. Lady Maria was fond of this aspect of the rakuyo, as she frowned upon blood blades, despite being a distant relative to the queen. Now, I believe that Lady Maria could have been chosen as one of the queen's royal guards because of how skilled of a fighter she was, and how similar the counterpart trick weapon Chikage was to the rakuyo, except one was blood imbued and the other was entirely dexterity. However, to show that Lady Maria had no interest in following her Canehurst heritage, she soon met a man who became her mentor, and soon someone she admired dearly. Gaomon, the first hunter. The relationship between Gaomon and Lady Maria was clear as day. Lady Maria looked up to him because of how skilled he was with his weapons and the intelligence of creating all of these gadgets and weapons as well to fight the monsters of the night. However, for Gaomon, he was completely infatuated with her to the point of complete obsession. Probably during her training sessions with him, Gaomon would observe her closely, memorizing all of her features. To back this claim up, back when I mentioned the doll, Gaomon managed to create a complete replica of her, from her height, her face features, and her pale skin, everything. To add on to this, he even kept Lady Maria's hair ornament that was hidden in one of the drawers of his workshop. Now, despite his clear obsession with her, he definitely had a genuine love for her, in his own way, though he had never had the courage to tell her. I mean, he carried a book called How to Pick Up Fair Maidens, which I let out a giggle when I first found it in my playthrough. The game never confirmed whether or not Gaomon was afraid of rejection or he just didn't know how to approach her, hence the book you find, despite being together almost daily. As a result, Lady Maria was completely unaware of his feelings for her and continued on as a highly skilled hunter. As for Gaomon, he would just continue to love her from afar. Sadly, this potential love story would wilt before it could even bloom because of one mission that completely cemented Lady Maria's demise, the fishing hamlet. To give some context about what this mission was about, Bergenworth was a college of the older time that studied human transcendence. Master Willem was the head of this institute, who believed that insight would bring about the truth and the idea of elevating into godhood, essentially. To further this belief, Master Willem was convinced that not only our paraphysical eyes, but the inner eyes, the ones inside the brain that would give visions that no normal human would see. So when news was sent to Bergenworth about a great one's corpse Cosm washed up on shore to a small fishing hamlet, and her body filled with parasites that would soon infect the village, and an unborn baby, the orphan of Cos, still in her womb. Master Willem was ecstatic to finally begin his research and achieve transcendence. Thus, he sent Lady Maria, Gaomon, and a few more hunters and scholars to make haste to the fishing village. Upon arriving, the villagers were already changing into fish-like monsters because of the parasites infecting them, and they all worshipped Cos as their mother. Their minds remained intelligent, so only their outward appearance looked monstrous. So what came next was nothing but a massacre of the innocents. Not only were the scholars examining and studying these villagers, they were being mutilated just to see if there were eyes in their brains in their transformed state. In the description of the accursed brew, it says, "Skull of a local from the violated fishing village. The inside of the skull was forcibly searched for eyes, as evidenced by innumerable scratches and indentations. They were nothing but test subjects to be experimented on, rather than be treated like humans, despite what they look like." As for Lady Maria and the other hunters, they were there in case villagers decide to resist or fight back. She may be a skilled hunter, but deep down she had a kind heart, and this was slowly taking a toll on her. The blasphemous act that could have potentially started this curse amongst the hunters had something to do with the orphan of Cos. I'm not exactly sure what had happened during the encounter with the orphan, but one thing's for certain: they murdered it and experimented on its body. Master Willem was shown to carry the orphan of Cos' umbilical cord, not realizing that it was one of the keys for ascending. Or he may have known and decided not to pursue it for whatever reason. This cruel act solidified all too familiar curse inflicted to all the hunters in Bloodborne, including yourself, the player. Bergenworth, blasphemous murderers, blood-crazed fiends, atonement for the wretches, by the wrath of Mother Cos, mercy for the poor wizened child, mercy. Oh please, atonement for the wretches. Lay the curse of blood upon them, and their children, and their children's children, forevermore. Each wretched birth will plunge each child into a lifetime of misery. Mercy for the poor wizened child. Let the pungence of Cos cling like a mother's devotion. This had finally shattered Lady Maria. After the butchering of the fishing hamlet, the hunters and Bergenworth scholars traveled back to Yarnum and the healing church, and left the village in ruins. Lady Maria, however, decided enough was enough. Guilt and disgust of what she had done consumed her greatly. It wasn't what she believed, nor was she trained to hurt the innocents. She was meant to protect them, but for the sake of knowledge and science, it made her a murderer. As an act of turning away from her role as a hunter, she dropped her precious rakuyo, the very weapon that was a part of her, down a nearby well and vowed to never hunt again. Back when I mentioned the description of her rakuyo, I didn't read out the last description because it would basically be a spoiler unless you guys already knew about this. But it says, one day abandoned her beloved rakuyo, casting it out into a dark well when she could stomach it no longer. Back in this healing church, the scholars were still conducting experiments on people, trying to ascend them into a higher being, a great one, in the research hall. Many of them had died or had their heads deformed into these giant brain-like fleshes because they would feed them these imbued waters. Lady Maria took the vow of pacifism, settling any disputes with peaceful acts, and became a caretaker for those poor souls. She was a mother to them, and they cried out to her as if they were her children. In the DLC, when you enter the research hall, you'll find many of them already driven mad and attempting to attack you. However, there were some that remained calm and human, like Saint Adeline, who Lady Maria was very fond of. She gave Saint Adeline a key to the balcony where the young woman was able to feel the soft breeze and sweet scent of flowers. This was one of the few acts of kindness Lady Maria shared with the patients to give them comfort from the horrors they had to endure. Sadly, it wasn't enough. Lady Maria still had to hear their screams and saw their tragic transformations into more failed experiments, the living failures, and the poor woman reached out only for her to reach her breaking point. Lady Maria made her way to the astral clock tower sitting on top of the grand cathedral, where it became her refuge from the horrors. There was a lonely chair standing inside the room, waiting for her arrival. She sat down and stayed there silently as her heart ached from the guilt consuming her. Trigger warning for what I'm about to say here. She slit her wrist and her throat, and she slowly died in the chair as her blood drenched her garments and dripped to the floor. Lady Maria wanted to be alone in her final moments, symbolizing that she wanted to carry the burden alone and hide away the dark secret from anyone seeking out for it, from either sick curiosity or just uncovering the truth. Unfortunately, Lady Maria's spirit wouldn't find peace. She was cursed to stay in the hunter's nightmare, a creation from the sacrilege act against Cause's body and her child. This place was made for hunters who were drunken by bloodlust and will forever seek out to kill, as an act of punishment. Wild beasts in their cages, so to speak. But not for Lady Maria. She just stayed in the astral clock tower, lonely, in her own sorrows. In order for this hunter's nightmare to end, you must discover the dark secret that was hidden within. And the answers you seek is hidden deep in the astral clock tower. There you will meet Lady Maria sitting quietly on a chair, and pools of her blood beneath her feet. As Simon said, climb the astral clock tower and kill Maria. She hides the real secret. And you do just that. Except Lady Maria wasn't going to let you do it so easily. She swore to herself that this secret will be taken to her grave, but because you were so eager to know, she'll have no choice but to kill you. Only an honest death will cure you now from your wild curiosity. Thus, the boss battle began. She was so determined to keep you away from the dark truth that she decided not to hold back. And when she realized the fight wasn't in her favor, she had no choice but to unleash the power of a vile blood. In her second phase, she would stab herself and use her own blood in battle. Despite being against her own heritage as a vile blood, this showed how desperate she was, and I couldn't help but feel bad for her when that happened. Regardless, you must defeat her in battle, and once you land the final blow, Lady Maria fell to her knees and slowly disappeared from the hunter's nightmare. Instead of this being a sad thing to have to kill her, it was an act of release for Lady Maria. Back in the hunter's dream, when you speak to the doll after defeating Lady Maria, she says this to you. "Good hunter, this may sound strange, but have I somehow changed? Moments ago, from someplace perhaps deep within, I sense a liberation from heavy shackles. Not that I would know. How passing strange." In conclusion, Lady Maria was a vile blood and a very skilled hunter who only depended on her own dexterous skills rather than any supernatural means. Her tale became tragic when she was forced to murder and mutilate the fishing villagers for the sake of knowledge. To atone her sins, she gave up as a hunter and became a caretaker for the patients in this research hall. Sadly, she couldn't do much comfort or ease their suffering, as more of them died as failed experiments. Her guilt became too great to carry, so she took her own life in order to keep this secret to the grave. However, she was prevented from having a peaceful end, and was cursed to stay in the hunter's nightmare until you arrived. Despite failing to keep this dark truth from being revealed, Lady Maria can finally be at peace. If you guys have reached the end of this video, thank you so much for staying tuned, and I apologize for this very, very long absence. With everything that's been going around, my creativity and my motivation has been dwindled. This video has been a long time coming because I've always wanted to do a video where I can talk about these Souls-like characters and these Souls-like game has always been one of my favorites, and like I said, Bloodborne is my favorite of all time, because I absolutely love all the backstories and the quests that you can learn from and just be immersed into these stories, into these side quests, if you will, of these characters. And of course, I wanted to start with Lady Maria because despite her not really commonly present in the base game, when I learned about her in the DLC and learned about her tragic backstory, I was completely immersed and I absolutely love her, and she became my favorite. And because March is like the Women's Month, I thought it'd be perfect to talk about all the female characters in all the Souls-like game, because my god, it's so tragic, but it's so beautiful at the same time. So I figured this would be a perfect time to do it. I will still do it even past March because I just love drawing these women and drawing and talking about their quest lines and their backstories. And so yeah, I'm excited to do more of these, and I already have like a list of who I'll be doing. There's going to be a lot, and I think this is just a good excuse for me to just, you know, do some fan art because I don't really do it that often. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you want to see more videos like this and don't want to miss out, just hit the like button and subscribe to me and hit that bell for a notification so you won't miss out any videos like this in the near future. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye bye!